join, I will let them in. So good evening and welcome to the Thursday, February 11th meeting of the Newmarket Conservation Commission. We'll go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll go ahead and start the roll. I just let David in, so I know we've got enough to get started. Sue, do you want to go ahead and start the roll?
Sure. Melissa, that's Melissa Brogel, right?
Yes, here.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, a check. Patrick Reynolds.
Present.
Chris Blackstone.
Here.
Sam Kenny.
Here.
Sarah Finch.
Here.
David Bell.
I'm here now.
And Matt Tara, our guest.
Okay. So tonight we have a guest, Tar, who's here to speak to us about birds of forests, fields, and shrublands, or encouraging bird diversity via habitat diversity. Matt is a professional forester and wildlife biologist who works as an extension professor and state wildlife specialist for the UNH Cooperative Extension. Matt works in close partnership with New Hampshire Fish and Game Department to help community of private landowners maintain and improve wildlife habitat on the lands they steward. So we'll go ahead and let Matt get started.
Excellent, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you here. I'm gonna share my screen. And can you all see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Great. So I'll go ahead and just jump right in here. Again, I'm Matt Tarr, I work for UNH Cooperative Extension as one of our foresters and our statewide wildlife biologist. And in this presentation, I'll discuss the different bird species that are associated with our most common upland habitat types in New Hampshire, our fields, our forests, and our shrublands. And I'll also provide a quick overview of the typical ways we manage these habitats to support a diversity of bird and other wildlife species. So I'll discuss the field habitats first, and I'll begin with just a basic definition of the habitat conditions that function as field habitat for wildlife. Fields can be recognized as upland or non-wetland openings that are dominated by herbaceous or non-woody plants. And these habitats contain few or no trees or shrubs. Now, as a wildlife biologist, I distinguish different fields based on how they function as wildlife habitat. So as habitat, fields can be grouped into one of two primary types in New Hampshire. Fields that function as grassland habitat, and then all other fields. So first, I'll discuss the grassland habitats. So think of grasslands as large fields that are at least 5 acres, but ideally greater than 30 acres in size. Now, these large fields are required nesting habitat for a small number of grassland-dependent birds that we refer to simply as grassland birds. So populations of these birds are declining dramatically throughout their range, but especially here in New England, primarily as a result of habitat loss. Now, the two grassland bird species that are most likely to occur on lands that are owned by private landowners or by communities are the bobolink and the Savannah sparrow. So bobolinks require fields that are at least 5 to 10 acres in size for nesting, and Savannah sparrows rarely nest in fields less than 20 acres in size. So populations of these two species are declining rapidly, but they do still occur pretty predictably in most grassland habitats of these sizes in New Hampshire. Two additional grassland bird species that you might encounter are the eastern meadowlark and the grasshopper sparrow. Now, these birds are rare, they rarely occur in grasslands less than 30 acres, and they are becoming very rare. Both are listed as threatened species in New Hampshire. Now, to function as habitat for grassland birds, a field not only has to be large, but it also must be very open. So very open means that there should be no trees or shrubs growing within the field, and the field should be wide, not narrow. So think blocky, square or rectangular fields, not long and narrow fields. So for example, here's a field that is large enough to be a grassland, but it's too narrow to function as a grassland. And the reason that it's too narrow is because grassland birds typically avoid nesting in fields where the field edges are close to the center of the field. And this is because grassland birds prefer to nest as far away from field edges as possible. They make their nest right on the ground, and this makes them especially vulnerable to predators that tend to hunt along field edges. So these birds tend to only nest in large fields, and they tend to locate their nests near the centers of these fields. So grassland birds are raising their young between about mid-May through the end of July. So the fields that we manage as nesting habitat for grassland birds should be mowed once each year, no earlier than August 1st, and the cut grass should be removed. So this yearly mowing keeps the fields dominated by grasses rather than allowing wildflowers and young shrubs to grow up into the field. And mowing after August 1st is late enough that nests and fledglings won't get destroyed by the mowing equipment. So I consider all fields that are unlikely to function as nesting habitat for grassland birds as other fields. And these include any fields that are less than 5 acres in size, fields of any size that have trees or shrubs growing within the opening of the field, and fields that are long and narrow, or those that are irregular in shape with peninsulas of trees that extend towards the center of the field, because these fields don't provide grassland birds with an area to nest away from the field edge. In any field where we are not trying to maintain nesting habitat for grassland birds, the habitat goal is usually to have the field support the greatest variety of species as possible. And the best way to do that is to allow wildflowers to grow up within the field. This is accomplished most easily by reducing how frequently the field is mowed. So mowing only once every 2 to 3 years allows a variety of flowering plants to grow up naturally into a field. But this frequency of mowing usually keeps the field from reverting to shrubs. Now, a way to further enhance habitat diversity is to divide a field into sections and then mow the different sections in different years so that you never mow the entire field all at once. So here, the recently mowed short grass areas provide ideal foraging habitat for American robins, for mourning doves, for chipping sparrows, for northern flickers. And if this were a large field, it may provide the short grass may provide hunting habitat for American kestrels and red-tailed hawks. The areas that are left unmowed provide all sorts of habitat benefits, including providing a diversity of flowering plants to support pollinating insects, and greater insect abundance improves foraging habitat for eastern bluebirds, swallows, and eastern phoebes. Flower heads, seed heads provide important fall food for birds like American goldfinches here, and winter food for dark-eyed juncos and common redpolls. And many pollinators also lay their eggs in flower stems, so leaving these unmowed supports healthy pollinator populations. The tall grass and the wildflowers provide nesting cover for wild turkeys, fawning cover for deer, and summer cover for turtles. And tall grass areas will also develop a thatch layer of dead grass that provides ideal cover for small mammals and snakes, which are important food for hawks, foxes, and owls. So there's there's all sorts of ways that you might divide a field into sections, but usually I set up a mowing rotation so that only one section gets mowed each year. And so every section gets mowed once about every 2 to 4 years. Fields that are mowed less frequently, like once only every 5 years or so, tend to get shrubby. And we see a huge increase in the number of wildlife species that will use a field once the field gets really shrubby, like around the point where the field, where the shrubs start to cover at least 30% of the field. And at this point, our field is no longer considered field habitat, a shrubland, because it now supports wildlife species that require shrubland habitats. All right, so what defines a shrubland habitat? Well, shrublands are upland openings that are usually dominated by a combination of shrubs, saplings, grasses, wildflowers, and ferns, and there are few or no overstory trees. If there are trees, they are spaced widely enough so they don't inhibit sunlight from reaching the shrubs. Now, shrublands go by a wide variety of different names. Some people call them early successional habitats or young forests and thickets. These all refer to shrublands. So here in New Hampshire, we have about 36 species of birds that require shrublands as their primary nesting and foraging habitat. So these include the prairie warblers and brown thrashers, chestnut-sided warblers, indigo buntings, field sparrows, blue-winged warblers, eastern towhees, and alder flycatchers. And collectively, we refer to these 36 species as the shrubland birds. So these birds require shrublands for the specific habitat structure that provides them with cover for nesting and perches for singing, abundant insects for raising their young, and abundant fruits for raising young and preparing for migration. Now, although there are a few shrubland birds, such as cardinals, Carolina wrens, northern mockingbirds, and song sparrows, that are commonly observed around yards where there are shrubby edges, many shrubland birds are uncommon in shrublands that are less than about 2 acres in size. And for most species, shrublands greater than 5 acres likely provide them with the best breeding habitat. So historically, these sorts of large shrubland habitats occurred in unique communities, such as pine oak barrens on the top of dry, rocky ridgetops, and in coastal dunes. And they were also created in other areas periodically by natural disturbances, such as wind and ice storms. So all of these types of shrubland habitats are actually very uncommon today. And so as a result, populations of many of the shrubland birds are declining dramatically. So in most landscapes today, we find that shrubland birds actually rely on human-created shrublands as their primary habitat. And today, some of the most important shrubland habitats that we have in New Hampshire include transmission line rights-of-way that are maintained in a shrubby condition by electric companies, in active and abandoned gravel pits, which tend to stay shrubby due to harsh growing conditions, in shrubby old fields, and as large young forest openings that are created via timber harvesting. So creating shrubby old fields is accomplished by simply allowing shrubs and saplings to grow up into a field naturally. And then once the shrubs are established, you don't really need to ever cut the shrub species. But eventually you will need to periodically cut individual trees that begin to grow up and to overtop and shade out the shrubs. So in a small shrubland, this can often be done using a chainsaw or a brush saw, which is basically a weed whacker with a saw blade. And so I basically suggest that you schedule one day or a weekend each year, and then you go in and cut all of the tallest saplings out of that shrubland during that time. Now in larger openings, that's way too much work to do by hand. And so in larger openings, we would use a brontosaurus or a Rako style forestry mower to mow the trees out of these openings about once every 7 to 10 years. So the opening that you see here in the picture was actually mowed flat because it was an overgrown, all tree stump sprouts and very few shrub species. But typically we would have these mowers mow around any shrubs that were growing in the openings. So habitat biologists and foresters also regularly use clear cutting as a tool to convert specific forested areas into shrubby habitats. This picture here is of a 25-acre clear cut made on the Londonderry town forest, specifically for New England cottontails. But it currently supports all of the shrubland birds that would be expected here. So this area that you see was cut using whole tree logging equipment. The area was allowed to regenerate naturally, and then it was recut again with a brontosaurus to keep it shrubby. So big openings like this are super valuable habitat for shrubland-dependent wildlife. However, these openings need to be planned very carefully because in many areas of southern New Hampshire, creating large clear cuts may result in a significant loss of mature forest habitat, primarily because much of our landscape is already heavily fragmented by development. So in the next slide, I'm going to zoom into this area of Londonderry right here. So the area outlined in yellow here is that 25-acre clear cut on the Londonderry town forest. And this clear cut was located really strategically. It's nestled right near the junction of two transmission line rights away, and it's near a very large gravel pit here to the west. So here, smaller clear cuts have been made more recently to create additional shrubland habitat as the older clear cut matures. So combined, these clear cuts, the rights of way and the gravel pit provide an ideal complex of shrubland habitat in close proximity to one another, which allows birds to regularly fly among these different openings. But importantly, note that these large clear cuts were clustered together and located on the edge of, not in the center of, these big blocks of mature forest habitat. So timber harvesting is conducted in these blocks of mature forest, but here trees are removed as individual trees or in very small groups with the specific intent of maintaining mature forest structure, tree health and diversity, and seed production for wildlife. And is very important because here in New Hampshire, we have about 34 species of birds that require mature forest as their primary nesting habitat. So many of these birds do forage in shrublands and in wetland openings, but during the breeding season and they feed in those openings during the breeding season and during migration, but they require large stands of mature forest for nesting. And so these birds here, I simply refer to them as the mature forest birds. So mature forest birds regularly occur in habitats where mature trees create a forest canopy that is over 30% closed. And that means that when you're in the forest and you look up, over 30% of the sky will be blocked by the foliage of mature trees. Most species of mature forest birds prefer to nest where the canopy is over 60% closed. And while you certainly can find these birds in small forest fragments, most of them prefer to nest in blocks of forest greater than 100 acres because large blocks have more interior space away from the forest edge, where the risk of nest predation and nest parasitism by cowbirds is high. There's a whole bunch of different species of forest birds, and each species has its own requirements for the specific forest types and conditions that it prefers or requires. So overall, what forest birds occur within an area is influenced by the forest type, meaning whether the forest is dominated by hardwood trees, by softwood trees, or a mixture of hardwoods and softwoods. What birds occur is also determined by the forest structure and by the presence or absence of special features. So the presence or absence and the density of different forest layers, tree layer, shrub layer, and the mid-story layer, determines what birds will use a forest as habitat. So landscapes that are composed of different forests that vary in their structure are most likely to support a diversity of mature forest bird species. Now, foresters and wildlife biologists use commercial timber harvesting as the primary tool for enhancing and maintaining diverse forest structure within mature forest habitats. When we are managing mature forests for birds, we want to maintain a relatively overstory, but in some areas, we remove individual trees or small groups of trees to establish and maintain diverse mid-story and shrub layer structure, simply by letting in sunlight. When we are timber harvesting, we try to retain any dead standing trees and any live trees that have visible cavities to maintain required nesting and foraging habitat for birds and other wildlife. So trees of different sizes accommodate different wildlife species, so it's best to retain trees of a variety of sizes across the landscape. One of the best ways to encourage and maintain a diversity of bird and other wildlife species is to encourage and maintain a diversity of tree and shrub species that together produce a variety of seeds, nuts, and berries. So we often use timber harvesting to remove trees that overtop berry-producing shrubs, so we can throw additional sunlight on those plants so they have enough energy to produce good fruit crops. We also use timber harvesting to make openings that around trees such as healthy oaks to allow those trees to expand their crowns, to capture more sunlight, and produce larger acorn crops. So in Newmarket and in the surrounding towns, there are lots of opportunities for private landowners and communities to maintain a healthy diversity of field, shrubland, forest, and wetland habitats. And like in any other area where development pressure is high, there's lots of challenges here too. So if you're interested in learning more about how to conserve and manage wildlife habitats, be sure to get assistance from professional wildlife biologists and foresters so we can help you with your efforts. And so your first and easiest step is always to call your county cooperative extension forester. So here in Rockingham County, that's Greg Jordan. And I think you guys have met with Greg. Probably most of you know Greg. UNH Cooperative Extension has county foresters working in all 10 of our counties, and our county and state specialists work in close cooperation with the New Hampshire Division of Forests and Lands, with New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and with the Natural Resources Conservation Service to help guide you through the steps of managing and conserving your natural resources. And so with that, I would be happy to try to answer any questions that folks might have.
I have one.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
There we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. That was really information dense. Thank you. Great slides.
Yeah.
I've got my note here. For the Londonderry Town Forest, the regenerating clear cuts, who worked with whom to do that project? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was a huge cooperative effort. So the Londonderry Town Forest, town of Londonderry has a private consulting forester who has developed a management plan and works with them for planning, for ultimately planning where that work is going to take place, and for working with the logging contractors. But that project in particular was also conducted in close cooperation with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department and with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because that work was being done specifically to try to create habitat for endangered New England cottontails.
Gotcha. It was great pictures. It really shows the concepts you're talking about. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Other questions from people? Who wants to job shadow Matt?
You're looking at it. I'm working from my daughter's purple room right now, so this is what the job shadow is these days.
Nice.
Have you been to Wigan Farm, Matt?
Wigan Farm, that sounds awfully familiar. Whereabouts is that?
So it's on Grant Road in Newmarket, and it's pretty much some of the habitat you're directly describing. So we have had bobolinks there. In fact, we still do. I'm pretty sure I saw them last year. And
Cool.
then I'm trying to think of the other bird that we've had there. Ellen would probably remember. That's rare. It was on that list of 4 that you started with. But what I noticed about that is they actually were, it seemed like they were nesting. There's a few rocky outcroppings in the field where there's like some low, almost like cedar brush that grows in there. And that seemed to be where the bobolinks were spending a lot of time. I don't know if they had their nest there because we try and stay away from them, give them space. And that field, we're actually talking about right now, applying for a grant to have that area. There's been some shrubby areas that have really grown up. So the trees are much bigger there. On opening that area up again. And then we've had a few places where there's some invasives that have kind of grown up around some smaller trees actually. So we want to get that taken care of too. But if there's anything else that we should be thinking about. So again, it's a field that gets mowed once a year. We try and mow it towards October because of the monarch butterflies. Although we had very few monarchs last year, it was kind of disappointing. And it has, I would describe it as being like the wildflower mix, right? It was grasslands at one point, but it's mostly wildflowers with some grassy portions. It's pretty dry. It gets pretty dry out there, I notice. And we do have some turtles that use it to lay eggs because there's a small pond there. I'm trying to think of what else.
It sounds like an incredible place.
Got a nice alder thicket swale along one edge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's got proximity to, like you described, it has proximity to both a electric line right of way. So that's pretty close to it. The Tuttle Swamp is pretty close to it, or border. And then there's 2 farms that are actually fairly close to it. And one of those farms is really managed as grassland. So it's moving the cows around, both of them are. So I think they probably have a fair bit of bird activity there too. So we are in a good place as far as having that mix of habitats and places where birds can move around. So, but
great.
yeah, if you ever want to come out there, Ellen's the expert on that area, but we'd love to have you visit.
I would welcome an opportunity to. So,
yeah.
You know, it sounds like you have a lot of different species that are using that field. And, you know, the grassland birds for me are often, they create a challenge. So, you know, they tend to be the most specific of all the wildlife species that would use that field. They tend to be the most specific in what they require. And so oftentimes creating the right conditions for bobolinks may reduce the plant diversity in some areas. Specifically, the bobolinks tend to really like, in my experience in Rockingham County in this part of the state, they really like tall, dense hay grasses for nesting. And I think primarily, I mean, they will nest in other areas, but that seems to be what they absolutely prefer, especially in fields relatively small, you know, fields that are less than, 10 acres, especially, or even less than 30 acres. That's what they really seem to like. And I think it just provides them with the best nesting habitat. You can see bobolinks anywhere. They go up to the tops of the trees to sing, and they forage all over the place, but they tend to nest in the centers often away from shrubs. But again, none of these species have read any of the books that we write about them. So, invariably, once you say that they're not going to do something, the next one you see is doing exactly what you said it won't do. So. But in general, if we're trying to make nesting habitat, so we can manage a field for all of those species. So one thing that we might, often do would be to soup up the middle of that field to be really nice grasses, tall, dense hay grasses, and then manage the edges of it where the bobolinks aren't necessarily going to nest, for more of a wildflower mix. So that, creates a field that has a variety of different habitat conditions within it. Good nesting habitat in the center, and then the bobolinks are like they're like the bluebirds and the phoebes. They forage on insects, and so they'll go all around the place, and they'll forage in insects in those wildflower areas, and even in shrubs too. So, yeah.
Yeah, we might. I think with Wigan, it's about 15 acres,
Okay.
and it's because we're mowing late in the fall, which is great. It's shifting more. It has shifted more to a diversity of wildflowers and other plants. So I think it's moved away from ideal bobolink habitat, but maybe we could have a visit and chat with you and talk about whether we do want to switch up our mowing. Because it seems to me if you mow late, you lose the grasses, but if you mow in summer, you might maintain some grasses. So maybe we could talk about that sometime. We are going to do pronto work in maybe March with a company on some old field.
Cool.
Just past the, kind of on the edge of the grassland. So
yeah, no, I'd love to get out and take a look at it and bounce ideas around.
Yeah,
bobolinks are tough. The grassland birds are tough, and they're getting tougher. They're becoming less predictable. When I started working, for cooperative extension a little over 20 years ago, birds like meadowlarks are pretty easy to come by. Now, boy, they are tough. They've really declined. I mean, they've almost disappeared entirely from the landscape. And so for me, making the decision to manage for grassland birds often first starts with an assessment to figure out, are they there already? And are there other large fields around you that are pulling them into the neighborhood? And so what we tend to find, single isolated fields that don't have a lot of other fields around, they might have bobolinks this year, but not in other years.
All right. Well, thank you again, Matt. We really appreciate the information. It was really helpful.
Well, great. Well, I hope you guys have a great night.
I have one more question for Matt.
Yeah.
This is Drew. Hey, Matt, it seems like one of the other big concerns when fields are cleared or spaces are opened is invasive shrubs seem to be the first ones that come in.
Yep.
Are there techniques or things that can be done to help minimize that?
Yep. You guys don't have enough time to hear my ideas about that. Yeah, I mean, that's a complex. Yes, there are. Invasive plants are a challenge. They aren't all bad for wildlife. We like to try to discourage them whenever possible. In some places that's relatively easy to do. In other places, in my experience, it's impossible to do. And so I think, there's all sorts of guidance about how to work with these, and we're learning more and more all the time. So, I know Ellen and I about invasive plants and what to do or should we do and how do we do all the time. So if you have particular sites that you're interested in, I would welcome an opportunity to take a look at them, and we can just, it's really like kind of a site by site thing to make decisions. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
for sure.
Oh, we'd love to have you over, Matt.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could have you out there to take a look around and maybe just do some birding and see what we see.
That would be great. Well, I know Chris and Ellen both have my contact info, so I accept emails at any time, and I would be happy to put something in the schedule.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
All right.
And sorry to all of your followers that we didn't have the right Zoom link for them, and hopefully they get to watch the recording.
We'll send it along to them.
Yeah, please send our pass that along. Thanks, Kim.
All good. All right, take care.
See you, Matt.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Chris, for inviting Matt. That was great.
Sure.
Did everyone get a chance to take a look at the minutes from January 14th?
Yep, motion to approve as written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so you want to call the roll?
Yep, let me just get back there. I need to get back there. Oh, here we are. Whoops, not that. I've lost you all. There. Hang on. Okay. Ellen Snyder,
Aye.
Patrick Reynolds,
Aye.
Melissa Sharples,
Aye.
Melissa Brogel,
Aye.
Sam Kenny,
Aye.
Sarah Finch,
Aye.
David Bell,
Aye.
and Chris Blackstone. Chris, you're muted. No picture, no mute.
All right. Well, she might have a pause here, so
Okay.
we'll hold everything up.
And Drew, how did you like the minutes? As long as we're doing everybody. 2, 4, 6. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
And now we have to do the non-public.
Motion to approve the non-public minutes.
Non-public notes.
Notes, sorry.
So moved. Or second, whatever you did. Either way.
I made a motion. I needed a second. So, all right, let's call the roll on that.
All right, Ellen Snyder,
Aye.
Patrick Reynolds,
Aye.
Sharples,
Aye.
Rogel,
Aye.
Sam Kenny,
Aye.
Sarah Finch,
Aye.
David Bell,
Aye.
Chris and Drew. Okay. They're not with us. So that's unanimous.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. Ellen, thank you for working on the treasurer's report until it was submitted to us correctly. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think there was some software glitch. I'm not an accountant, and the accounting software seems a little confusing, but I think we have it. So the total balance in the conservation fund for this month is $250,041.08. And that includes the Shanda fund, which is now at $4,164.46. Thanks for that nice $4,000 donation.
Great.
And the fund again, 4,000.
$4,764.46.
Okay.
And then the balance is in the rest of the cash.
Right.
And then the income was, besides the 4,000, was $96.01 in interest. No land use change tax deposits. Just a reminder that we still have the $2,500 outstanding for the Heron Point Management Plan and $75,000 commitment for the Clark easement.
Right.
Okay, the balance on the general fund money is $1,255.93. $1,255.93.
Okay.
We seem to be on track for that for this year. That's it.
Thank you. The only subcommittee I was looking at was I did reach out to members of our Riverfront Advisory Committee, and that's Kenny's our representative on that, and Megan Rayback is the town council rep on that. So Sam, do you want to just give an update as to what's going on with that?
Yeah, so you had reached out to me maybe towards the end of last week, and I basically said, I think with the timing of how the pandemic started, we hadn't actually had a formal meeting of that committee. There was some action this week. I did get an email, I want to say either Tuesday or Wednesday, from town manager Steve. We're basically asking for meeting availability. So nothing has been formally scheduled, but it is back on the radar to hopefully have something scheduled in the near future, and we can have our first formal meeting.
Great. And the only other item on that I wanted to just let you guys know is Mike Hoffman voluntarily said that he would be willing to do a site walk down there at the riverfront, particularly around the Shanda Park area, when you guys get together. And if you want to contact him, he'd be happy to give you an update on what he sees down there, which might be kind of helpful for you guys to assess what's going on. And that might not happen until something like April, realistically, depending on the weather and everything. May not be great to go down there when there's a lot of snow.
Yeah, probably better to actually see something.
But that'll give you guys a chance to meet and kind of talk through things a little bit. So
no, definitely that would be nice. If it's relevant, I think technically my term is up next month. I am planning on putting back in for another 3-year period, but just figured I'd mention it.
Right. Well, I think as long as you're planning to be, just make sure and, fill out your form work. And if you need that emailed, I'm sure they can email it to you. And then I would think we didn't really put a term limit on that on the ad hoc committee, as far as I know. So I would think you would just continue on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Town council, is Megan on the call? I didn't see her. No. Okay. Sarah, planning board.
So you were at the planning board meeting, and I noticed that the agenda item is the Mill Mill Road property. So that was the only agenda item on the planning board agenda on Tuesday. So I'm expecting we're going to chat about that later.
Yeah, so if there was nothing else, then we can hold that till later.
Okay.
All right, so I didn't get any additional correspondence or anything else. As far as what I have for the chairman's report, I don't have any new information or anything other than what's on the old and new business. So we can go directly to all those items because there's quite a bit there. So let's start with what we were just talking about, which is Wigan Farm, and getting some of the brush cleared out of there. So Ellen, you submitted the grant and had that signed off. Is that right? To Fish and Game to
Yep,
get
it's
some funding?
super nice. It's not a ton of money, but it's one page. You send it in and they approve it in a couple days, and you just do the work. I like those kind of grants. Very nice. So this is when you're on Wigan Farm and you go through the field and you cross the stone wall. So it's about 3.5 acres stone wall down to the pond and up to the forest. And then there's a little bit we want to do up when you go in through the gate on top of the hill by the abutter, and there's a lot of invasive plants in there. So I got quotes from 4 different entities that you see there on the memo that I sent. And one of them saw the property, some over the phone. They do this a lot, so they don't always have to see it. But I think John Brown, which is a really big company, they have the big Brontosaurus. Matt had a picture, and they have I think the best equipment to do what we need to do, because we've got some bigger vegetation, some small stuff. They can go right up to a stone wall with their Brontosaurus. And some of the other companies have smaller equipment, and I'm not quite sure they'd be able to get into what we want to have done. So John Brown's a little bit more expensive, but I think because their equipment's bigger, they can get done faster. So we estimated 3 days. Fish and Game won't pay for this kind of work if it's within 300 feet of a house, residential building, because this money comes from hunting interests. So they want to make sure people can actually hunt on that piece of acre. So they'll pay for the work down below, but they won't work for the hill. So I figure we could chip in the balance and up to $5,000 total, of which the grant we would get reimbursed from Fish and Game for $3,150.
Any questions, comments?
I have a comment. The John Brown Company I've dealt with quite a few years ago. It seemed to me they did excellent work. So I would certainly recommend that we went with them.
Yeah, I've worked with them before. They're very, matter of fact, he said, we can go out next week. And I said, no, let's wait till the snow melts. So, we want to wait, but they do a lot of habitat work for Fish and Game. They do a lot of the utility lines, and they're really good at, even though they're using this really big piece of equipment, if you do have like a native shrub or a clump that you want to leave, they'll go right around it. And they do really good work.
Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
It's just
Chris?
a quick, simple one. Thanks, Patrick. Ellen, when you just quickly mentioned there's some invasives out there, what's out there? Is it autumn olive or what have you seen
A
out there?
lot of in there. There's buckthorn, glossy buckthorn,
Oh.
and bittersweet are the two. And then up on the hill, there's a lot of multiflora rose.
Oh,
A little bit of other stuff. So, I mean, they'll, the idea here is that we're going to knock it all to ground, and we actually want that to be this old field that sort of come back in a mix of shrubs. But we are going to have to go out and do some probably mechanical removal as the shrubs resprout, as the invasives resprout.
gotcha. But it'll be real obvious where they were.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Patrick, just so I'm clear, does the council or Steve have to do anything? He signed the actual grant application, but can we can just go ahead?
We can, because we've gotten enough bids that we are reviewing. So that's my understanding. As long as we have more than 3 bids, if we're going over 1,500 is, and Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, that was my understanding, as long as we had multiple bids to pick from.
I would have said that's true, but probably worth confirming with the town council rep.
Okay. And they're not here tonight. But what we could do is make a motion to approve using Brown, and with the contingency that we will run it by the town council rep to see if there's any other considerations. How does that sound? Okay, so I'll go ahead and make the motion. I make a motion that we did from Brown and Company to clear the brush on Wigan Farm in the designated areas, under the condition that we will also run it by our town council rep to see if there's any other considerations before reaching out to Brown and Company.
Can I add an amendment to that? I think we have to approve up to $5,000.
Thank you.
From the conservation fund, knowing with the reimbursement to be $3,150 from Fish and Game.
Do you want
Yes.
that to be a second motion, Ellen?
Sure. Amended the motion, and I'll second
Just-
it. You accept the amendment.
Okay, so the first one we're gonna second is that Patrick Reynolds moves that the Conservation Commission accept the bid from John Brown to clear brush at Wigan Farm in designated areas, under the condition that consultation will be made with the town council rep. And so we need a second on that, and then Ellen can. So is
I'll
there-
second that. Chris Blackstone.
And then Ellen, you can make
Amendment.
amendment.
to approve up to $5,000 from the Conservation Fund for this project, with $31.50 to be reimbursed from Fish and Game when we complete the project.
I'll second that. Melissa Sharples.
All right. And voting. Ellen,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Sharples,
Aye.
Melissa Brokel, hi.
Hi.
Sam Kenny,
Aye.
Sarah Finch,
Aye.
David Bell,
Aye.
Chris Blackstone.
Aye.
Drew, you still there? I know you're an alternate, but it doesn't matter.
I don't think I'm a voting member.
You are always a voting member.
Then aye.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Patrick, shall I contact Megan and then proceed with contacting
Yeah.
Sam Brown?
Yes, why don't you, that would be great. Thank you, Ellen.
Sure.
It's not here, but Ellen pointed out that we made a proposal to engage John Martin with for Heron Point, the management plan out there, and we hadn't heard anything from him. So I did call him again today and left a message, and I haven't heard back from him. So it's clearly him. He's leaving a message that it's his company. So I don't doubt that I'm, not calling the right number or the right person, but I'm not sure why we haven't heard back from him yet.
I'll try to get a cell phone number from him because he does some other work around here. So
Okay.
see if we can get a clear. I think you
So-
would have heard from him by now. That's was surprising.
Yeah.
I hope he's
that's-
all right.
Maybe, hopefully
Yeah,
he's just
yeah.
super busy.
Yeah.
Okay. So Boulder Drive, I'm not sure if people are familiar with Boulder Drive, so I'll go ahead and tell you where Boulder Drive is. If you were to get on Dame Road, right off of Main Street 108 or 108, there, right by the coffee hut. Boulder Drive was a newly constructed cul-de-sac road a couple of years ago, I think now, maybe 3 years ago, actually. And they are reaching a point where they've sold all the properties there and they're forming a homeowners association. They have a bit of open space land, and they were approached by the town. Mike Hoffman actually spoke with them about having a trail across the property. So I think it would kind of go from Dame Road, and I'm thinking that the other end would be, could it be Lamprey Road? Does that sound right? Melissa, Melissa Sharples, you're in that area. Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
it actually runs through my backyard.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes, the trail starts on Dame Road right across from the Frog Pond there and goes the length of the new development and comes out onto Lamprey Street at the foot of Sanborn Ave.
So I think what they were possibly looking for us is whether we would be interested in sort of having some responsibility, I guess, for this trail. I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm guessing it might entail monitoring this trail to some extent to make sure it remains open. There wasn't a lot of detail there, but that sounded like what they were interested in our role being. And I wanted to see what this group thought and if anyone had any questions or comments.
Oh, it would be a public trail. Anybody could go on it.
Yeah.
I would want to know what level of responsibility they would want from us and where they would come in, since it is their property.
Mm-hmm.
but it does abut conservation land.
What land is it abut?
There's the strip between our row of properties, our backyards basically, and that trail, which begins their property line, is conservation land. It's a stream that feeds into the Piscassic, I'm sorry, the Lamprey. So at the foot of, it comes out at the mills, basically, the foot of the dam.
Mm-hmm. But when you say it's their open space as part of their subdivision, or this is different open space?
No, there's conservation land in between our land and their land. It's state, from what I understand, I think it's state conservation land.
Must be something else. Then I'm not picturing it, but could be interesting.
Yeah, there is conservation signage there.
Oh.
So
What state is the trail in currently? Do you know?
It's pretty, it's very usable. I mean, I walk my dog back there all the time, and there was someone who sort of blew it out on the Dame Road side and took a brush hog back there and cleaned it up a little bit and made it a little bit more obvious for use. The Lamprey Street end, the trailhead was pretty obvious, and it was well trodden, but it just sort of at one point sort of faded away. So someone went in there and blazed a trail basically. So it's just a quick, couple 100 yards. It's not a huge thing.
It does show, Ellen, on the just your map. I just pulled it up. It does show some open space in there. It's not clear that that's the space because a Boulder Drive isn't on that map still. If you just go to the coastal viewer map, it's not on there yet. I can see Lamprey Street. So I don't know.
There was a parcel that was always in the conservation lands layer that it was an open space as part of a subdivision that was supposed to get built years ago, and it never did.
That's it.
That doesn't actually exist. That is not open. That's not, it never was, that development never happened. So that open space never happened.
Okay.
So it doesn't exist actually. Obviously it's out there on the land, but it's not, nobody owns it. I mean, I don't know who owns it.
So it's not.
Which open space are you talking about?
I think the one you're talking about. It's interesting to know what signs are. I don't think I guess my point is it's not like a town-owned conservation land. It's not state. It's not. Maybe we should look at that. We should look at that a little closer.
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
I'm looking at I guess just a Google map. In that general area, there's something labeled as Schultz Place open space. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one I was thinking of. So you're in a different place. And yeah, David, that's the one I was thinking of. That's the one that never happened.
Okay.
Right. So this property sits between Lamprey Street and Schultz's open land.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I will see if I can that might be a good question to see if I can get, if Mike has an actual map that he has that we could look at that would designate. If there is going to be a designated trail, it should probably be on a map that the homeowners association has seen and reviewed and agrees that this is where the trail is going to be.
Well, the interesting thing about maintaining a trail is it's done by volunteers. So you would think the people that live there would be the volunteers to maintain the trail. Would be my thought.
Right.
Can I show my
That's
screen?
pure bourbon.
Where it is? I'm happy to.
It's full of bourbon.
Just wait.
Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
I think if I can.
Maybe I have to give you permission.
share.
I'm not. Yeah, doesn't say anything about that you're limited.
Okay, it's not letting me for some reason.
Are you getting a message?
Yeah, it's telling me I need to quit first.
Oh, well, let's not do that. Maybe what you could do is just send it out to us, and then we can send that along to Mike and see if we can get any more information.
Okay.
I think what Mike really wanted to is if people would be interested in going out there. But again, I would say that doesn't make sense right now with the snow cover that we have, but maybe later on in April, if it's clear, that's a better time to go and walk so that we clearly saw where the trail was. So I'll also make that suggestion to him.
Yeah, I'm happy to show you around.
Okay, that would be great.
Can I'd just say that the Piscassic River HOA that I'm in has conservation land out to the Piscassic off of Grant Road, Brialia and Kelty Circle. And we have our own, on that conservation land, we have our own trail, but it's maintained by us. And I was curious to whether or not they're creating their covenants right now and want to put this in the language of their covenant.
That's what it sounds like to me, because the original site plan for this, before the homes were even built, included this trail as part of it. And it actually included the trail wrapping around and going along Dame Road. I don't think that given the boulders and where everything is, I don't even think that's feasible. But this trail was included in the original site map as their property.
Okay, thanks, Melissa.
Yep.
Okay, item number 3 under old new business, I wrote as 57 Neal Mill Road, and I think either I transposed that number or I just got it wrong, but it was being referred to in the planning board as 75 Neal Mill. So as Sarah alluded to, the planning board on Tuesday had the first meeting about this proposed house. This is one house on the 33 acres that sit at the end of Neal Mill Road, 750 feet past the gate. So if you're familiar with Neal Mill Road in Newmarket, you know it ends at a gate because it becomes a class 6 road at that point. And 750 feet approximately down that class 6 road going south towards Newfields, on the left is a field of approximately 35 acres, mostly grass, mowed currently, with what I would describe as a island of trees in the middle of it. So that was what was on the agenda. The proposal was basically outlined, which is on that 750 feet of class 6 road, they propose widening that to 14 feet wide and laying down gravel, and also burying electrical lines down under the road all the way out to the house. They didn't really talk much about the house. They have had a septic plan and a well. I believe there's actually been a well that's already been drilled out there. At least there's a well cap out there now. So that was what was introduced to us at the meeting. There really wasn't a lot of other detail that was reviewed that I'm aware of. There were several people. There was Christopher Albert was the environmental consultant who was representing the the family that has a purchase and sales agreement. And he answered some general questions, but there wasn't, am I missing anything, Sarah? There wasn't a lot of real specifics covered at that meeting, were there?
No, and I think it was because it was just like a review and to request to build, and there was some talk about the driveway, but it was really preliminary.
Okay. So two things happened since then. One, Ellen wrote her write-up that she did and sent to us, which I want to review. And I did reach out to Chris Albert as well to tell him that I would invite him to do a presentation of the project to us as well, to the Conservation Commission. So Ellen, do you want to generally outline what you talked about in your memo that you provided for all of us?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So there was a somewhat similar proposal back in 2008 on this property, and the person went through a little bit of the process and then decided not to go forward. So there was a bunch of material put together for that, and so I just went back and put some of that together, and there's some new stuff has happened, and which you're all familiar with. There's been even more land conservation in that area, and we ourselves have contributed to that. So I think the big, it's a piece of private land, so ostensibly somebody could build a house on it, but the question here is that they would be going across 700 plus feet of a Class 6 road. So that's a public resource. It's become a very significant recreational trailhead, both from Neal Mill Road, where people can now park, and people coming in on Oldie Road into the Piscasset Greenway. And so it's that recreational resource that would be impacted. You'd now suddenly have a driveway across essentially the whole trailhead for 700 plus feet. The town, we hold conservation easements on both sides, essentially almost that entire way. And we have a responsibility to make sure those easements are not impacted in any way by a third party. So we do have to be cognizant of what they're planning to do on that Class 6 road, and will that impact those easements in any way. So I think those are the two, that's two issues. So the recreation importance of that Class 6 road right there, the easements that we hold on either side of the Class 6 road, and then the property itself where they want to build is ecologically quite significant. It's got prime wetlands. We think there are more wetlands there than are the prime wetlands. So there's a question of whether they really should do some more wetlands assessment. And it's a really high value piece. You can see that just because of all the land conservation that's occurred around there. So I think those are the three major concerns from a conservation perspective. I think there are other legal and other sorts of issues that are not really in our purview. But I thought it was important to have those in front of us.
I appreciate it. I thought it was very well written and very informative. I would point out to this group, because not everybody was obviously there at the planning board, that the planning board also raised that they felt that some of the additional agencies that could be involved in decision-making or at least be consulted included both the Rockingham Planning Commission, Rockingham County Planning, and because Newmarket is actually technically part of the Stratford County Planning Commission, both of those planning commissions should at least be notified of this project. Rockingham in particular, because this is a major access point for the Rockingham Trail. The other agencies in town that will be consulted include pretty much all the major departments. So Public Works, Fire Department, and Police Department, I believe, all have to be consulted on this as well. So there's a lot of different moving parts. And I don't know, and obviously Southeast Land Trust is being brought in. And there's also the additional property abutters. They're going to try and identify both people who live in Newmarket and Newfields. I think anybody living on Neal Mill Road might have an interest in this as well. I did go out there the other day just to measure if there was actually 14 between the existing stone walls, which is kind of the those stone walls are the indicators of where our property boundary starts, I believe, on either side of the Class 6 road. And there is 14 feet there. In most places, it's anywhere from 16 to 18 feet. So there is, I think they could do what they're saying they could do within that space. But I would encourage anyone else to go out there if they have questions and if you want to measure for yourself. But there's clearly 14 feet there. The other issue, of course, would be what would happen with the gate, because the gate currently does prevent, not entirely, but does to some extent prevent unauthorized vehicles from going off-road there. So, the town made a decision. I guess the town has a jurisdiction. They can put a gate there and they can put a sign there what vehicles can travel there. That's their jurisdiction. We don't have any involvement in that. But one of the concerns I know that is people in the neighborhood have expressed is that they do see some unauthorized motor vehicles that go down there, motorbikes, ATVs, and they can then get off the Class 6 road and cause damage. And I just worry that if the gate is moved, you're going to open up more possibility of that happening, which I think is something we should be concerned about, because the lands that could possibly be damaged would be the conservation land.
Did Patrick, did Diane Hardy at the meeting mention the development of properties on Class 6 roads? The definition of Class 6 is that the town does.
She said that she had put some stuff, and Sarah could probably clarify this, but she said she put information about Class 6 roads out on a website. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of links. So if you go to the Newmarket website and pull up the agenda for planning board, there's a lot of links out to, I'm trying to think. So if you go to the agenda, the online agenda, and click on the topic for the Neal Mill Road property, there's a bunch of attachments. So there's a driveway plan, there's a bunch of stuff there. There's section 674-41 Class 6 road. So you can take a look there. But I think that's where she put all the documentation.
And there is no town ordinance on Class 6 roads, is that correct?
That sounds right.
But we do, so anything that would happen out there would still have to be approved by the planning board, and the town council as well would also have to approve it. Is my
Actually, I think
understanding.
the planning board is advisory. And so it's the town council decision, and they can say, no, it's not good for the town to do this. Or they could say, yep, it's okay to do.
Right.
Or they could say, yes, it's okay with caveats. I think one of the things with there is 14 feet there, but if they want to bury the utilities, they're going to be digging down and hitting tree roots. The 14 feet is going to affect trees that are along the road. And then you have a driveway over a recreational trail. So there's no snowmobiles, no winter. The winter activity on that will cease because you now have a plowed driveway. So I think the question about the recreation is, it's not if they have the 14 feet space. It's what does that do to the public resource that's already there?
Right. I agree. It's definitely a question about what can happen on that road. And I guess that's a question for the town council, not for the planning board. So would the March meeting be too early to have them come and present on the project to us if they're agreeable to coming in?
Sure, I think that's a good idea because the planning board will meet again before. So presumably they will put together more information because I think most people, as Sarah said, it was kind of a preliminary presentation. They really don't have a lot of information with their proposal yet. There's not real detailed engineering plans. So they need to put some more information together. And then I think, Sarah, wasn't the site visit going to be maybe in April when you could actually see something?
Yeah, they didn't want to do it in March because of the snow.
Now, I don't think your next meeting is the 17th, is what I heard. Is that right?
Yeah, my term is up in March, so I probably won't be at that meeting.
Okay.
I think they're trying to do it after town elections.
They're trying to do it after town elections. Okay. So technically our meeting is March 11th. So we would actually be before they've had another meeting with the planning board. But the advantage I would think might be I know that the planning board would appreciate any input that we have. And so if we had a meeting, we might be able to raise any issues or questions that we have, or any additional recommendations that we would make as far as getting additional wetlands identified on the property. We could then make those recommendations so that they have them before their next meeting. So that might be the advantage of having them come on March 11th.
Sure.
Okay, well,
Yeah, no harm.
so that's my plan. I will go ahead and confirm that they will come. It sounds like they were amenable to coming then, but I'll go ahead and tell them that we'll put them on.
The planning board is March 9th.
Well, they said last
Tuesday,
night.
March 9th.
They said on Tuesday that they were.
Oh, maybe they made it
out.
special.
Yeah, they might be putting it out to the 17th, and that might be like Sarah said, because there's an election.
Yeah, I think aren't elections on the 9th?
The 17th is a town council meeting, but maybe that's gonna change too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Planning board meets on Tuesdays. I don't know if the 17th is a Tuesday.
17th is a Wednesday.
Okay, maybe it's the prior Tuesday. They don't have the date on the New Market site yet. So my understanding is that they'll have their next meeting after the town election so that if there's new planning board reps, they can join.
That makes sense.
Patrick, I have a question. The memo I sent, I copied Diane Hardy, but I don't know, in terms of our minutes, does this become part of our minutes, or should I ask that we make it part of our minutes, or?
I think we should make it part of the minutes, and I was gonna just suggest that you send it to Sue and she could include it in the minutes.
I have it.
She's got it, so she'll just minutes.
Thank you.
Addendum 1.
Okay. The next item I put on there is prep funding, and this was something that I believe Chris and Ellen pointed out, and I really didn't get a chance to do much of any kind of research on it. I just saw the flash email that that there was going to be some funding out there, but we have a quick turnaround on it, right? Does it due if we want to apply? This is watershed protection money. Is that correct, Chris and Ellen?
Yeah, I would have to,
Yes.
I had sent it to Diane Hardy and she saw it because I thought maybe it was something the planning department might want to also see if it's something that would fit. I didn't look at it terribly closely, sorry.
Yeah, the only thought I had on it was that I thought it had something about funding to inform people about the project in Portsmouth that they did, that we had a presentation on. I think it was in the summer of 2019 or the fall of 2019, about people who live along creeks and rivers and the treatment on their lawns. And so they use some of the funding like this to have a little grassroots campaign where they went out and talked to people and just let them kind of try to convince people to sort of monitor or alter their practices in terms of putting fertilizer, nitrogen out on their lawns, which then just tends to run right off if there's a big rainstorm. You know, there I think it was Sagamore Creek that they were working on, but here I think it would be on the Lamprey, both upstream of the dam and downstream of the dam, where people have yards that run right up to the riverfront. It would be great to get some information out there. You know, we tried to sort of do it by having an informational meeting, but I don't know. I got the sense from the people that did it that the best way is to have someone go out and speak to people kind of door to door. So maybe I could follow up with them to see if they have any ideas about if we wanted to do something like that. How do you get funding? You know, does this kind of funding apply to something like that? I think they found a college student intern who may have gotten a stipend or something to do it. But that was the only thing that came to mind for me. All right, and the last thing I put on there, just to continue to talk about them, is I was trying to come up with, you know, virtual things that people can do or just in their family groups as we continue on through the pandemic when we can't have big group activities. Again, doing April as a street cleanup, you know, just walk your street in your neighborhood, and then we could sort of track it. So what I was thinking is getting a spreadsheet of all the streets in town and then publicizing it primarily through our social media stuff and just saying, if you're interested, let us know, or they could even post, you know, themselves, hey, I went out on my street, I went out on Lang's Lane where I live, and I, you know, cleaned up this section of the road. Here's a picture of it. You know, just kind of promote it that way. Because obviously we can't have any big group meeting on it or anything, but people could do it on their own with their family members or their whoever they're living with. And it would be a way to do an Earth Day event when we can't really do any of the typical kinds of Earth Day things that we think of, maybe because of we'll still be doing all of the pandemic requirements.
Yeah, I think it would be a good way to get more followers on social media and get more people involved in the, just knowing about the properties.
I think that's a great idea, Patrick, and I think I can write about it in the monthly news, the townwide e-newsletter where I write about our speakers coming in, or I write about something with the Blooming Newmarket Garden Club.
Okay.
So that reaches a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, I just know in the past, whenever we've done it, we've really found that it's amazing how much stuff just walking along the street. And I think now more, a lot of people, that's what they do for exercise because they can't go to the gym or whatever. It's, you can do it while you're doing your normal walk in your neighborhood. And so it wouldn't just be conservation land. It could be anywhere where you walk in Newmarket, but the conservation land would be great too. But I definitely see more roadside trash than I see, luckily than I see people throwing trash in conservation land.
That's the other good thing about that is you probably wouldn't get so much that you would be disappointed keeping that bag yourself and throwing it away yourself as you throw away your own household rubbish and garbage. Because a group wanted to do something, have a cleanup out Ash Swamp neighborhood, and the DPW people were very concerned that they didn't have the manpower because of COVID. They didn't hire summer students like they were used to, and it was just going to be too much stuff for them to come pick up. Because
we'd have to say it's do it yourself. Yeah. So if it's, if you find cans or glass, you can recycle those items. And if it's, if it's other items, it probably won't be that much trash that it's going to overwhelm.
Yeah, because we're not having people doing miles of highway. If you're really talking about do your block, do your street, do your neighborhood, whatever. Yeah. I'm liking the idea of photos, and we can put just like sample those through Instagram or the one Melissa does on the Facebook. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. So I think we'll definitely, when we meet in March, want to start thinking about starting to promote it, as we get closer to April.
I'm happy to maintain the spreadsheet too.
Okay.
I'm happy to make a flyer too, and help with any organization. I have a lot of volunteer organization experience, but my career started out with marine debris, so I have a lot of experience in that area too. I think there is also, we should maybe think about promoting like the day of curbside recycling pickup. That's the day you go clean up your street. I mean, I live right downtown, and that is definitely the dirtiest that I ever see the streets, is the day of or the day after curbside recycling pickup. And I don't have a ton of experience with this, but I'd also be willing to play around with making a map from the spreadsheet of streets, which might be kind of cool, more for maybe an after promotion, like look at what we did. Here's the pictures. Here's a map of all the streets that volunteers hit, kind of thing.
Okay, that's great. That sounds awesome. I think, anything we can do will be a plus. Like it's only a win, right? This kind of project, if we do half the streets or a quarter of the streets, they're still going to be better than they were before. So, and then again, the other idea was to do in June something where we go out and identify trees in Newmarket as part of Arbor Day. And I'm trying to reach out to Kevin Martin about seeing if he'll do a guest spot with us to talk about looking for big trees in New Hampshire, since he is the expert at that and has a book out on it, which is really a great book if you have never seen it. I think it's Big Trees in New Hampshire or something like that, or
So you're thinking of having him be the April conservation meeting guest?
No, I was thinking more like either May or June, if we could get him.
Oh, gotcha.
And just talk a little bit about, you know, identifying trees, because he's got, you know, things you do as far as like measuring. I think there's like 4 or 5 feet up from the base that you want to measure to identify a champion tree, and he can provide all kinds of additional facts and interest things if we can get him. So I'll continue to try and get him.
An idea about that might be to do a program in conjunction with the Newmarket Public Library, because they could run that. They have a Zoom license. So his presentation could be or you're thinking of a June meeting with us and he tells us what to do.
That's not a bad idea. I mean, if it works better, and it's because that makes it more flexible.
It makes it awful flexible, and they're looking for sort of thematic outdoorsy things. They have one coming up March 20th, which is the first day of spring, about planting for habitat in your own yard. And then this would fit in quite handily, but it could be a Saturday morning, it could be some evening, it could be anything. But the Conservation Commission gets the publicity and we help broadcast it. They've got the Zoom license, so it could be up to 100 people quite easily. So it could be a town-wide kind of a thing that we're doing, and they have great channels and great graphics that they can advertise stuff with.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep you in the loop, Chris.
Well, see, maybe he might love to come to this kind of a meeting and just people dial in if they dial in. But I was imagining like who all might like to learn about how you go about. Plus, he's an author. So you say author, and I think like, oh, the library would love to have an author come and do some kind of a talk.
Or he can promote his book too. Yeah, it's a good book if you
it is.
Never seen it. Okay, well, before we adjourn, since Sarah has told us that she is not going to be continuing on with the planning board, which we're sorry to hear, but I do want to thank you, Sarah, for I don't know how many years you've served on as the planning board representative, but it's been more than a few. So thank you so much for your service to the town and to the commission, and we will miss you, and we hope all the best for whatever you decide to do with your spare time.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure working with you all for the last few years.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else.
Patrick, I had one question. Last fall, we talked about the culvert on Ash Swamp Road. And I think Rick Molaski was going to investigate. Has anything come of that?
No. Nothing other than he did not want to use the beaver deceiver, which is what we had promoted. And I went out there and walked it, and Jeff Goldnoff, who used to serve on the commission, lives right next door to it. So he and I did a real up close look at it. And so I need to follow up with Rick on that.
Thank you.
Melissa, Sharples, I wanted to tell you that it was great to see the planning board meeting on the, when I got a notification that it was on the conservation Facebook page, because then I could watch it, and it was really good because I was there and he was our man. But it was a good meeting.
Tim posted that.
Yeah, but it was perfect.
Tim posted that, so
yeah, but it was perfect.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? Okay. If we don't, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I do have one quick thing. Are we going to interface with Wendy so that it's a brand new Zoom link? So it really is either A, universal, or B, it's just month by month by month?
So I think what happened was, and it's probably my fault, is that I was under the impression that we just carried forward, but I forgot that we had a special Zoom link for the 14th of January because there was a meeting at the same time of the school board, maybe.
Oh, we
And
did change.
so that's what caused the problem, is that she then created a special Zoom link for the 14th. And so I should have reverted to the Zoom link that we had in December. So yes, normally the old Zoom link does carry forward, but in this case, it did not.
So maybe we should just start brand new fresh since December's old enough and we're now going to be in March.
Yes, I will definitely request her to send us a new Zoom link. Remember, the Zoom link has to be embedded in the agenda that gets town's website.
Yeah.
So if anyone ever comes and asks you, I want to attend the Conservation Commission meeting, it is out there for the public. Anyone in the public can attend.
Oh yeah, so all they need is that little code number or
all they need is that little code number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I second it.
Oh, you second my motion to adjourn? Okay, I was just waiting. I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to wait.
No hard feelings, but I'm done.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Night.